So now we want to talk about creating IKs. To create IKs, we're going to have to go into our skeleton and create IK handle options. So we're going to be working primarily with two different IK solvers, single chain and rotate plane. These were also called SC and RP prior to 2016. So you might hear that referred to in other literature. So how we apply IK is we select our first joint followed by the last joint. And you can see I have a little reticle to do that, but we have a problem. I want to create one for my clavicle, and my clavicle is kind of our vision's impeded from the last joint. So if I can't select the first one, it's selecting the last one. It's going to be a problem. So why a single chain over a rotate plane? Because a single chain solver solves for no elbow. It doesn't need that complexity of an elbow in this system, where a rotate plane does solve for an elbow. Our clavicle doesn't have an elbow in it, so we're going to choose single chain solver. It also gives less things to break if you don't have that pole vector, they call it, system in there. So I'm going to expand my joint chain, my clavicles, and instead of trying to do this inside my perspective view, I'm going to do this in my outliner. I'm going to click my first joint, my target joint, and I'm going to hold down Command and select the last joint. Boom, we got an IK. Now, I didn't show you before, but see how there's no rotation values on our shoulder? Now, when we move, that's going to be important. So I'm going to call this my left clavicle IK, clav IK. Let's look at this. We got translation and rotation values here. My first reaction is the freeze transforms on this. Not only will freeze transforms not get rid of the values, it'll also jack up the control worse than it is right now. So if I say modify freeze transforms, it does that, and it doesn't even zero out the values. So I'm going to undo that, and I want to make sure it didn't mess up anything else in the system. Okay, so what did we get here? We got this little control that we have to build a control for the animator for, because the animator is never, ever supposed to animate our IKs because of these weird values. So if I move this up, remember how our joint had zero values on it? Now it actually gets rotations. Remember, IKs take translations and convert them into rotations. Okay, kind of cool. We always have to undo after we're done because we would never be able to get back to rest if we didn't go right back and undo it. So we got to be a little careful with manipulating and playing around with our IKs before the controls are put into it. So we have our shoulder. Now I want to talk about creating an RP IK, or rotate plane IK, for our arm here. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to expand our arm like that. And I have my IK system here where I'm going to create this. So I'm going to go back into my IK, and I'm going to switch from single chain to rotate plane. I'm going to select my first joint, hold down Command, select my last joint, and whoop, something happened. It snapped forward. It's not solving for the elbow anymore. And this is because, I'm going to undo it. Let's look at our joint chain before it. I have rotation values on here. I did not freeze transforms. This arm is actually a clean system. It just didn't freeze it. And I wanted to show you why you have to be careful. You have to have clean values because IKs are very delicate systems. They need they need to know where they're going. And with this value, that's why it popped and snapped and it kind of broke the system. So I'm going to freeze transforms on it, which is going to clean it up. Another thing we can actually point out here is that there is a bend in this arm. So naturally, the IK is going to try to bend this way. But if we had a very small bend this way, even a tiny one, that's going to confuse the IK. The IK might think we want to bend our arm this way instead of forward. So that's why we want to keep away. We want to keep our arm straight because otherwise you're confusing it. Now I can force it to go into a certain direction. And how I do that is I can move it in a direction that I want it to go into, hold down the right click and say set preferred angle. And now it knows it's supposed to go in that direction, even if it's bent down in a little bit of a wrong direction. Now that's typically not a way you want to do it. You don't want to try to force IKs because IKs have a tendency later on to dislike to break because of those type of things. Because there's a lot of math going in to make those to make up for those little changes in our system. So why even worry about that? Why build on a cracked foundation? Build a really good, clean, two-dimensional, flat, planar joint chain. So one of the first things that people make mistakes when they do set a preferred angle is they undo back, right when they get this joint chain, which what you're doing is you're undoing the set preferred angle. So I'm going to zero that out. Okay, I do say in this system, it is planar and it is bent in a certain direction. I really technically do not have to do a set preferred angle, but it's always good to be sure when you're dealing with IKs. So I go back into my IK tool. I make sure I switch to rotate plane solver. I click my first joint, hold down command, click my last joint. And like I said, you can, if you have a good shot at seeing seeing your joints, you can just select them in the perspective view. Now this one doesn't create quite as bad values as the SCIK. You'll see that we have translations, no rotations, but we still got values, so we still have to build a control for this. So see, that actually manipulates our arm. We got an elbow in there. Good, 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 good. So this would be something like our left arm IK, like that. So that's our building our IKs. I do want to do one more thing. I want to show you the difference with the orientation of these IKs. You see the SCIK is actually pointing in the same orientation as our joint. Like here's our joint chain, like that. And that's kind of why the values are all a little bit more, a little more chaotic, where the RPIKs or rotate plane IKs are actually world oriented. That's also why the rotation values aren't there. Another little thing we can see on here is, remember how I said it solves for an elbow? It also solves for a twist on here too. And we're going to build a control system for that. Good. So that's kind of a summary of the different IKs we're going to be covering in this class.